I still remember the exact moment I realized 4 years of my life had been wasted. It wasn't when Robert called me into his office with that sympathetic smile that never reached his eyes. It wasn't even when he said, "Jessica, we've decided to go in a different direction with the director position." No, it was when I glanced through the glass wall of his office and saw his son, Ethan, leaning against the reception desk, flashing that cocky grin at my team, while twirling a set of keys to what would have been my corner office. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 4 years, 80-hour weeks, countless missed birthdays, dinners, and vacations. Also a 26-year-old who couldn't tell a profit margin from a paperclip could take the job I had earned through blood, sweat, and genuine results. 4 years ago, I was just another mid-level project manager at Meridian Technologies. A decent job with decent pay in downtown Portland. Nothing special, but it paid the bills. And I was good at what I did. Maybe too good. That was my first mistake. It was a rainy Tuesday morning when Katie from HR poked her head into my cubicle. "Jessica, Robert wants to see you in his office." She had that look, that something big is happening look that made my stomach flip. I smoothed my blazer, checked my reflection in my phone screen, and made the long walk past rows of cubicles to the executive suite. Meridian had been struggling for months, stock prices falling, rumors of layoffs swirling through the break room like coffee steam. I had prepared my "why you shouldn't fire me" speech weeks ago, just in case. Robert Miller, CEO and majority shareholder of Meridian Technologies, was standing at his window when I arrived, gazing out at the Portland skyline like a king surveying his kingdom. A kingdom that was, if the quarterly reports were anything to go by, crumbling beneath his Italian leather shoes. "Jessica, come in," he said without turning around. "Close the door." I perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, hands folded neatly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Was this it? 4 years of climbing the corporate ladder only to be pushed off during budget cuts? When Robert finally turned to face me, I was surprised to see not the grim face of an executioner, but the desperate eyes of a drowning man looking for a life raft. "We're in trouble, Jessica," he said plainly, dropping into his chair. "The Mitchell account is walking. They're unhappy with the direction of the new software suite." My breath caught. The Mitchell account represented 30% of our annual revenue. Without them, the company wouldn't just be struggling, it would be circling the drain. "They haven't signed with anyone else yet," Robert continued, shuffling through papers on his desk. "But they're meeting with Apex next week." Apex, our biggest competitor. If they landed Mitchell, they'd have an almost monopolistic hold on our market sector. "I've seen your work, Jessica. The team respects you. You get results." He leaned forward, fixing me with an intense stare. "I need you to take over the Mitchell account. Save it. Save this company." I blinked, taken aback. "What about Derek?" Derek Evans was our director of client relations. The Mitchell account was his baby. Robert's mouth tightened. "Derek is part of the problem. Mitchell doesn't trust him anymore. We need a fresh approach." He slid a folder across his desk toward me. "This is a proposal. If you can save the Mitchell account, there's a promotion to director in it for you when Derek retires next year. Corner office, substantial raise, the works." My mind raced. This was the opportunity I'd been working toward since I joined Meridian. A directorship before 35 was practically unheard of. But the Mitchell account was a mess, and stepping on Derek's toes would make me enemies in upper management. "What's the timeline?" I asked. "Mitchell gives their final decision in 4 months. You have until then to turn things around." 4 months to salvage a relationship that had been deteriorating for years. To redesign a software suite that was already behind schedule. To save a company that was hemorrhaging money and confidence daily. "You're the only one who can do this, Jessica," Robert said, his voice dropping into that practiced, sincere tone that successful CEOs perfect. "I need you." Looking back, that should have been my first warning sign. Flattery from a desperate CEO rarely ends well for anyone but the CEO. But I was young, ambitious, and, if I'm being honest, flattered that Robert had noticed my work. So I took the folder, shook his hand, and accepted the impossible task. That night, I called my sister Claire to tell her about the opportunity. "Just be careful, Jess," she warned after I excitedly laid out Robert's proposal. "When bosses start making big promises about future promotions." "This is different," I insisted, pouring myself a generous glass of wine. "The Mitchell account is make or break for Meridian. If I pull this off, Robert would be crazy not to promote me." "And if you don't pull it off?" Claire asked quietly. I hadn't considered that. Failure would mean not just missing out on the promotion, but potentially being the scapegoat for the company's collapse. I took a large sip of wine. "I won't fail," I said with more confidence than I felt. The first week was a nightmare. Derek was predictably furious that his account had been reassigned, and he made sure everyone knew it. He forgot to include me in crucial emails, scheduled meetings when he knew I couldn't attend, and the project files he finally handed over were a disorganized mess that took days to sort through. Meanwhile, the Mitchell representatives were cold and skeptical during our initial meeting. Their lead contact, Victoria Mitchell herself, daughter of the founder and now Chief Innovation Officer, made it clear that my gender and relatively junior position did not impress her. "We've heard all this before from Derek," she said dismissively after my carefully prepared presentation. "Fresh ideas, renewed commitment, blah, blah, blah. Why should we believe anything will change just because they've put a new face on the same broken promises?" I felt the eyes of every person in the conference room on me. My palms were sweating, but I held Victoria's gaze steadily. "Because unlike Derek," I said calmly, "I'm not going to promise you we can deliver everything on your wish list in an impossible time frame. That's why you're unhappy now, over-promising and under-delivering." I took a breath. "What I can promise is transparency, realistic timelines, and solutions that actually address your core business needs instead of just checking boxes on a contract." Victoria's eyebrows rose fractionally, the first crack in her icy demeanor. "Here's what I propose," I continued, pushing the initial presentation aside and pulling out a single sheet of paper. "Give me 2 weeks. Let me shadow your operations, talk to your end users, really understand where the current software is failing you. Then I'll come back with a scaled-down proposal focused on solving your 3 biggest pain points in the next 6 months. If you don't like what you hear, you can still go with Apex." It was a gamble. 2 weeks was precious time out of my 4-month window, and there was no guarantee Victoria would like my revised proposal any better than the current one. But I knew from experience that most software projects fail because developers don't truly understand what users need. They just build what executives think users want. Victoria studied me for a long moment, then glanced at her team. 2 weeks, she said finally. "But we're still taking the meeting with Apex." I nodded, trying not to show my relief. It wasn't a victory, but it was a stay of execution. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. I practically lived at Mitchell headquarters, arriving before their first shift and leaving long after most. Employees had gone home. I interviewed everyone from warehouse workers to executive assistants, asking the same questions. What's the biggest waste of your time? What information do you need but can't easily access? If you could change one thing about the current system, what would it be? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Patterns emerged. The software was feature-rich but unintuitive. Critical information required navigating through multiple screens. Reports that managers needed daily took hours to compile manually because the automated reporting was inflexible. These weren't sexy problems with sexy solutions. There would be no groundbreaking AI or blockchain integration to dazzle the board with buzzwords. Just solid, practical improvements that would save Mitchell employees hundreds of hours of frustration. Meanwhile, back at Meridian, I was assembling my team, picking the best developers, UX designers, and QA testers, often having to fight with other directors to borrow their top talent. Each night, I'd return to my apartment after midnight, eat, take out at my kitchen counter while reviewing the day's findings, fall into bed for a few hours, then start the cycle again. By the time I presented my revised proposal to Victoria and her team, I had lost 5 pounds, was surviving on an alarming amount of caffeine, and knew more about Mitchell's operational workflows than most of their managers did. The presentation was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Friday, the same day Mitchell was meeting with Apex in the afternoon. No pressure. I arrived early to set up, my stomach in knots. This wasn't just about saving the Mitchell account anymore. Over the past 2 weeks, I'd come to genuinely care about the people I'd interviewed, about making their work lives better. And selfishly, I had invested too much of myself into this project to fail now. Victoria arrived precisely at 9, flanked by her executive team and their IT director. Their faces were impassive as they took their seats. "Thank you for the opportunity to learn about your operations," I began, conscious of keeping my voice steady despite my exhaustion. "I promised you a proposal focused on your 3 biggest pain points, but I'd like to start with something more fundamental." I clicked to my first slide, not a bullet-pointed list of features or a flashy demo, but a simple day-in-the-life timeline of a Mitchell warehouse supervisor named Carlos, whom I'd spent several days shadowing. Carlos starts his day at 6 a.m., I explained, walking them through his workflow and highlighting all the moments where our software slowed him down or failed him completely. I continued with similar timelines for a customer service representative, a logistics planner, and Victoria's own executive assistant. "These are your people," I said, looking directly at Victoria. "They're dedicated, smart, and constantly finding workarounds for tools that should be making their jobs easier, not harder. They deserve better, and we can give them better." For why? The next hour, I outlined my proposed solutions, not a complete system overhaul, which would be disruptive and risky, but targeted improvements to the most problematic areas, delivered in 3-month phases. Each phase would deliver tangible benefits before the next one began, allowing Mitchell to see ROI immediately, rather than waiting for a big bang release that might never live up to expectations. When I finished, there was silence. Victoria glanced at her IT director, who was nodding slightly. "This is not what I expected," Victoria said finally. My heart sank. Not what she expected. Was that good or bad? "Most vendors try to dazzle us with cutting-edge features we don't need," she continued. "You're the first one who actually paid attention to how we work." She looked at her team. Thoughts? One by one, her executives weighed in. The solutions weren't perfect, they acknowledged, but they were practical, focused on real problems, and, most importantly, seemed achievable within the promised timeframes. Victoria turned back to me. "We're still taking the meeting with Apex," she said, "but I think we can cancel our meeting with Litex next week. Let's talk contracts on Monday." It wasn't an outright victory, but it was close enough. I managed to maintain my professional composure until I got to my car, where I let out a most unprofessional squeal of delight. The celebration was short-lived. As soon as I was back at Meridian, Robert called me into his office. "Well?" he demanded as soon as I closed the door. "They want to talk contracts on Monday," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "Victoria's still meeting with Apex today, but she canceled their meeting with Litex." Relief washed over Robert's face. "Thank God," he muttered. Then, composing himself, he added, "Good work, Jessica. I knew you could do it." "This is just the beginning," I cautioned. We need to deliver on these promises, which means I'll need resources, authority over the development team for this project, and yes, whatever you need, Robert interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. Put together a budget and resource request. Derek can help you with that. I frowned. Derek? I don't think that's a good idea. He's not exactly thrilled that I'm handling his account. Robert's expression hardened slightly. Derek has 20 years of experience at this company, Jessica. He knows how things work. I've already asked him to mentor you on this project. I bit back my protest. This wasn't the hill to die on, not when I'd just secured a tentative victory. I'd find a way to work with Derek, even if it meant gritting my teeth through his mentorship. Of course, I said instead. I'll speak with him today. That afternoon, I found Derek waiting in my cubicle, spinning slowly in my chair with a smug expression. Heard you managed not to completely tank my account, he said by way of greeting. Robert thinks you walk on water. Must be nice being the shiny new toy. I forced a smile. I'm just trying to save the account, Derek. The company needs it. We all do. I gestured to my chair. Do you mind? He stood, but made no move to leave. Robert says I'm supposed to help you navigate the budget process. Consider me your new best friend. The way he said friend made it abundantly clear we were anything but. Still, I maintained my professional facade. Great, I'll put together a draft budget and resource allocation by Monday. Maybe we could review it after my meeting with Mitchell. Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. Sure thing, superstar. Just don't get too comfortable in the spotlight. This company has chewed up and spit out plenty of rising stars before you. With that ominous warning, he finally left, leaving me to wonder exactly what I'd gotten myself into. The next few months were the most intense of my professional life. Monday's meeting with Mitchell resulted in a signed contract, not as large as their previous one, but with clear deliverables and reasonable timelines. Robert was ecstatic, publicly praising my work during the all-hands meeting and hinting at exciting leadership changes to come. Meanwhile, I assembled my team and got to work. The first phase of deliverables was due in just 3 months, which meant countless late nights, working weekends, and more coffee than any human should reasonably consume. My social life evaporated. My apartment became little more than a place to shower and occasionally sleep. Even Claire stopped calling as, frequently, tired of my one-track conversations about work and progress metrics. Derek, true to form, was both present and useless. He attended every meeting, offered vague advice that often contradicted my strategies, and took every opportunity to remind the team and Robert of his decades of experience. But he contributed no actual work, no solutions to the very real problems we faced daily. What kept me going, beyond the promise of promotion, was the genuine progress we were making. Our first release to Mitchell was on time and immediately made a difference to their operations. Victoria herself called to thank me, noting that system complaints had dropped by 40% in the first week. The second release, 2 months later, was even more successful. Mitchell expanded their contract, adding another division to our scope. Robert took me to dinner to celebrate, hinting even more strongly that the director position was all but guaranteed. Derek's retirement is coming up fast, he said, swirling his expensive scotch. The board is very impressed with your results, Jessica. Very impressed indeed. I allowed myself to imagine it. Director of Client Relations at 34. A corner office, a substantial raise, a seat at the decision-making table. All the sacrifices of the past few months would be worth it. The final phase of the Mitchell implementation was the most challenging. We were integrating our system with their legacy databases, a process that uncovered years of data inconsistencies and workarounds. My team worked around the clock, often sleeping in the office. I was there with them, troubleshooting problems, ordering midnight pizzas, doing whatever was needed to keep morale up and progress moving. The night before the final deployment, I was still at the office at 2 a.m., reviewing test scenarios with my lead developer, Maria. "You should go home, Jess," Maria said, stifling a yawn. "We've got this covered." I shook my head, squinting at the screen through exhausted eyes. "I need to be sure. This has to be perfect." Maria closed her laptop. "It is perfect as software ever is. You've checked every line of code, tested every scenario. Go home. Sleep. You need to be sharp for tomorrow's deployment." She was right. I knew. But leaving felt like abandoning my post before the battle was won. "One more hour," I compromised. "Then I'll go." Maria rolled her eyes but reopened her laptop. "1 hour. Then I'm physically removing you from this building." The deployment went smoothly as major system deployments ever go. There were minor issues, quickly resolved by my team. By the end of the day, Mitchell was fully operational on our new system, with significantly improved efficiency across all departments. Victoria took me and my core team out for dinner that night, something she'd never done with Derek in all their years of working together. As champagne flowed and the Mitchell executives praised our work, I finally allowed myself to relax. We'd done it. Against impossible odds, with too few resources and too little time, we'd saved the Mitchell account and, by extension, Meridian Technologies. The next morning, Robert called me into his office as soon as I arrived. "Sit down, Jessica," he said, gesturing to the visitor's chair. "First, let me congratulate you on the Mitchell deployment. The board is thrilled." I couldn't help but smile. "Thank you. The team worked incredibly hard. They deserve all the credit." Robert nodded absently. Yes, it was a team effort, of course." He shuffled some papers on his desk, not making eye contact. "As you know, Derek's retirement is next month. We've been discussing succession planning for the director position." This was it. The moment all those 80-hour weeks had been leading to. I sat up straighter, trying to look professional despite the excited flutter in my stomach. "We've decided to restructure the department," Robert continued. "The director role will be expanded to include oversight of our international accounts." I nodded eagerly. "I've already been developing strategies for the Asian market. I think we could really grow our presence there with the right approach." Robert finally looked up from his papers, his expression unreadable. "That's good to hear, Jessica, because you'll be working closely with our new director on those strategies." The words took a moment to register. "New director? I don't understand." My voice sounded distant, as if someone else were speaking. Robert cleared his throat. "We've decided to bring in someone with more executive experience for the role. The board feels that with our expansion plans, we need someone who already has a track record at the director level or above." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Someone like who?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "My son Ethan will be joining us next month as the new Director of Client Relations and International Strategy. Ethan Miller, 26 years old, 2 years out of his MBA program. His executive experience consisted of a VP title at his uncle's small marketing firm, where by all accounts, he'd accomplished precisely nothing before leaving to pursue other opportunities." "Ethan," I repeated, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I see." "This is good news for you too," Robert hastened to add. "You'll be promoted to Senior Project Manager with a 15% raise and team lead status on all major accounts. A consolation prize, a bone thrown to keep me from making a scene. 15% more money to continue doing exactly what I'd been doing. While Ethan took the corner office and the seat at the table that should have been mine." Through the glass wall of Robert's office, I could see the object of our discussion, leaning against the reception desk, chatting up Robert's assistant. Ethan Miller, with his perfectly tailored suit and his father's last name, being handed the keys to a kingdom he hadn't helped build. "When were you planning to tell me about this? Restructuring?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice professional. Robert had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "We just finalized the decision yesterday. I wanted you to hear it from me first before the company announcement next week." "I see," I said again, because what else could I say? That he'd lied to me? That I'd sacrificed everything, my time, my health, my relationships, for a promotion that was never going to be mine? That the we who had made this decision was probably just him, giving his son a cushy job regardless of merit? "I hope you'll help Ethan transition into the role," Robert continued, apparently mistaking my stunned silence for acceptance. "Your knowledge of our clients, especially Mitchell, will be invaluable to him." The audacity of it all finally broke through my shock. He expected me to train his unqualified son to do the job I had earned, to smilingly hand over my hard-won client relationships to a nepotism hire. "And if I don't want the senior project manager position?" I asked quietly. Robert blinked, genuinely surprised. The thought that I might not eagerly accept his scraps clearly hadn't occurred to him. "Well, I suppose we could discuss other opportunities within the company," he said slowly. "But this is a generous promotion, Jessica. Most people would be thrilled." Most people hadn't worked 80-hour weeks for months on an explicit promise of a directorship. Most people hadn't saved a floundering company only to be passed over. For the boss's son, I took a deep breath. "I need some time to think about this." Robert's surprise turned to wariness. "Of course. Take the weekend. We can talk more on Monday." I stood, legs surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "Thank you for letting me know," I said mechanically, and walked out of his office without waiting for a response. Ethan glanced up as I passed, flashing that practiced, charming smile that had undoubtedly helped him coast through life. "Hey, you must be Jessica. Dad's told me all about the amazing work you've been doing. Can't wait to work with you." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not malice, but obliviousness. He didn't even realize what was happening, what was being stolen from me to be handed to him. In his world, this was just how things worked. Opportunities manifested, doors opened, and success arrived without the inconvenience of having to earn it. "Welcome to Meridian," I said flatly, and walked past him to my cubicle. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I went through the motions, responding to emails, attending a team meeting, reviewing project timelines. But inside, I was numb, processing the magnitude of the betrayal. Not just Robert's broken promise, but the casual expectation that I would accept it with a smile and continue pouring my talents into a company that saw me as a workhorse, not a leader. When 5 p.m. came, I did something I hadn't done in months. I packed up my bag and left on time. No staying late, no taking work home, just a quiet walk to my car in the fading daylight. I drove home on autopilot, parked in my usual spot, and sat there for a long moment, keys in hand, staring at nothing. Then I did something else I hadn't done in months. I called my sister. "Jess?" Claire answered, sounding surprised. "Is everything okay? You never call before 8 these days." The concern in her voice broke something inside me. "No," I said, my voice cracking. "Everything is not okay." I told her everything. The broken promise, Ethan's appointment, the insulting promotion offer. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face. "Oh, Jess," Claire said softly. "I'm so sorry. That's beyond unfair. That's robbery." 4 years, I whispered. 4 years of my life for that company. The last 6 months I barely existed outside of work. For what? So Robert's son could get a corner office? "What are you going to do?" Claire asked. I wiped my eyes, suddenly exhausted beyond words. "I don't know. I told Robert I needed the weekend to think about it." "Come over," Claire said immediately. "Ben's making lasagna, and the girls have been asking about their Aunt Jess." You shouldn't. Be alone right now. The thought of my nieces, with their uncomplicated love and endless enthusiasm, was tempting. But I shook my head, though Claire couldn't see it. Not tonight. I need to process this, to figure out what I'm going to do. Jess, Claire's voice turned serious. Promise me you won't make any rash decisions tonight, not while you're hurt and angry. I won't, I promised, though part of me was already composing resignation letters in my head. I just need some time alone. After hanging up, I finally went inside my apartment. It felt strange being home before dark, like I was playing hooky from my real life. I kicked off my heels, poured a glass of wine, and stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the city lights coming on as dusk settled over Portland. 4 years at Meridian, 4 years of climbing the ladder, believing that hard work and results would be rewarded. 4 years of my life that I couldn't get back. But as the initial shock and hurt began to fade, something else took its place. A slow-burning anger that felt almost clarifying. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw my situation with absolute clarity. I had let Robert, convince me that my worth was tied to their validation. That a title, an office, a seat at their table was the ultimate measure of success. I had sacrificed everything else on that altar. Friendships, family, time, health, even self-respect. And for what? To be passed over for someone whose only qualification was his last name? I took a long sip of wine, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Maybe this was a blessing in disguise, a harsh but necessary wake-up call. I pulled out my laptop, not to check work emails as I normally would, but to open a blank document. At the top, I typed, "What do I actually want?" Not what Meridian wanted from me. Not what would impress Robert or secure that corner office. What did I, Jessica Chen, actually want from my career, my life? I began to write, hesitantly at first, then with increasing speed and conviction. By the time the bottle of wine was empty and the moon was high in the sky, I had filled pages with thoughts, hopes, plans, none of which involved continuing to work at a company that didn't value me. There would be more to this story, much more. The moment when I walked into Robert's office on Monday with my decision, the meetings with Victoria Mitchell that would change everything, the expression on Ethan's face when he realized what he'd unwittingly been part of. But that night, as I finally fell into the first restful sleep I'd had in months, I knew one thing for certain. This betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. The weekend passed in a strange blur of clarity and anger. I spent Saturday morning updating my resume, something I hadn't done in years. It felt surreal listing all my accomplishments at Meridian, especially the Mitchell account rescue that should have secured my promotion. I found myself adding details I'd normally downplay. Salvaged 12 multi-tour client relationships single-handedly. Led cross-functional team through complete system redesign. Delivered 40% efficiency, improvement within 6 months. When I finished, I stared at the document, seeing my career through new eyes. This wasn't the resume of someone who should be grateful for a pity promotion. This was the resume of someone who should be running her own department, or maybe her own company. Claire came over Saturday afternoon, bringing her homemade lemon bars and a sisterly determination to help me plan my next move. "You need to call Victoria Mitchell," she said, perched on my kitchen counter while I made coffee. "She respects you. She might have connections." I shook my head. That feels unprofessional somehow, using a client relationship for my personal benefit. Claire arched an eyebrow. "More unprofessional than Robert giving your earned promotion to his unqualified son?" She had a point. Still, the idea of leveraging the Mitchell relationship made me uncomfortable. I'd built that relationship on trust and delivering results. Using it for personal advancement felt like it would tarnish what we'd created. "I'll think about it," I said. which was my standard response when I wanted Claire to drop a subject. Claire saw through it immediately. "No, you won't. You'll go into that office on Monday and accept whatever scraps Robert throws you because you're too professional to do anything else." Her words stung, mostly because they hit close to home. I had spent my entire career being professional, following the rules, respecting hierarchy, trusting that merit would be recognized and rewarded. And where had that gotten me? "Maybe I won't," I said quietly. Claire tilted her head, studying me. "You're serious, aren't you?" I sipped my coffee, considering. "I think I am. I need to figure out what that looks like." Sunday morning, I woke early with a plan crystallizing in my mind. I wouldn't quit in a dramatic huff. I wouldn't embarrass Robert publicly, or badmouth Meridian to Mitchell. I would be strategic, professional even, but on my terms, not theirs. I spent the day preparing, researching, making notes, rehearsing conversations. By Sunday evening, I felt calmer than I had in months. Whatever happened tomorrow, I was taking back control of my career. Monday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I dressed carefully, my best suit, my power heels, the pearl, earrings my grandmother had given me for my college graduation, armor for the battle ahead. The office was buzzing when I arrived. Word about Ethan's appointment had clearly leaked, judging by the sudden silences when I walked past groups of coworkers. Maria caught my eye from the break room and gave me a sympathetic grimace. So even my team knew before I'd been officially told. Perfect. I went straight to Robert's office. His assistant, Tina, looked up with surprise. "Jessica, Robert's not expecting you until 10. "This won't take long," I said, with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Is he in?" Tina hesitated, then nodded. "Let me just check if he's available." "No need," I said, already opening his door. "Like I said, this won't take long." Robert was on the phone, feet propped on his desk. He frowned at the interruption, then quickly dropped his feet and sat up straighter when he saw me. "Let me call you back," he said to whoever was on the line, then set down the phone. "Jessica, our meeting isn't until 10. "I know." I closed the door behind me and took a seat without waiting for an invitation. But I've made my decision, and I didn't see any reason to wait. Robert leaned back, a practiced expression of concerned leadership settling on his face. "I hope you've had time to think things through. I know Friday's news was disappointing, but this senior position really is an excellent opportunity for someone at your level." Someone at my level. As if my level was something fixed and immutable, rather than something I'd earned the right to advance beyond. "I've decided to decline the senior project manager position," I said calmly. Robert frowned. "That's unfortunate. But as I mentioned, we might be able to find another role." "I'm not interested in another role at Meridian," I interrupted. "I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately." The practiced expression faltered. "Jessica, don't be hasty. I understand you're disappointed, but throwing away your career here over one setback seems extreme." "It's not a setback, Robert. It's a pattern." The words came out before I'd fully formed the thought, but as soon as I said them, I knew they were true. Robert's brow furrowed. "What pattern?" I leaned forward. "Did you know that in the 4 years I've been at Meridian, I've received exactly the same percentage raise as my male counterparts, despite consistently outperforming them in every metric? Did you know that I've been asked to take notes in executive meetings where I was the most senior person present? Or that Derek has taken credit for my work on at least 3 occasions that I can document?" Robert's expression hardened. "If you're implying some kind of discrimination..." "I'm not implying anything," I said coolly. "I'm stating facts. Facts that I ignored or dismissed because I believed that eventually results would speak for themselves." I gave a small, humorless laugh. And then you gave the job I earned to your son, and I finally saw the pattern clearly. Ethan is highly qualified. Ethan has 2 years of work experience at his uncle's company and an MBA from a mid-tier school. I cut in. I have 4 years of progressive responsibility here, 6 years at Tanner Systems before that, and a track record of saving failing projects, including the one that just saved this entire company. If that's not enough to earn the promotion you explicitly promised me, then nothing ever will be. Robert's face had turned an interesting shade of red. I never explicitly promised. You did, I said flatly. In this very office, 4 months ago. Save the Mitchell account, and the director position is yours when Derek retires. Those were your exact words. He shifted uncomfortably. Business circumstances change. The board didn't make this decision, Robert. You, and I stood up, smoothing my skirt. And that's your prerogative as CEO, just as it's my prerogative to take my skills elsewhere. For a moment, Robert looked genuinely alarmed. Jessica, be reasonable. Where are you going to go on such short notice? The job market is tight right now. Take some time to think this through. The concern in his voice wasn't for me, I realized. It was for himself, for Meridian. He was suddenly calculating the impact of losing me right after the Mitchell implementation, with his inexperienced son about to take over. My future employment isn't your concern, I said. But I will fulfill my professional obligations. I'll document all my projects, train whoever you assign to take them over, and ensure a smooth transition for the Mitchell account. At the mention of Mitchell, Robert's expression grew even more concerned. About Mitchell, I think it would be best if you let Ethan handle communications with them going forward, given your emotional state. I almost laughed. My emotional state had nothing to do with his request. He was terrified I'd tell Victoria about the bait and switch, potentially jeopardizing the newly secured account. Of course, I agreed, smoothly. Ethan should absolutely take point on Mitchell immediately. After all, he is the new director. Relief flashed across Robert's face. Good, I'm glad we can be professional about this. He cleared his throat. HR will process your resignation. I hope you'll reconsider once you've had more time to think, but if not, well, we appreciate your contributions to Meridian. The dismissal was clear. I nodded once and turned to leave. Oh, and Jessica? Robert called as I reached the door. I'd appreciate if you'd keep our conversation private. No need to upset the team with details. I looked back at him. This man who had broken his promise without a second thought, who was now asking for my discretion to protect his reputation. Goodbye, Robert, I said simply, and walked out. The next 2 weeks were surreal. Word of my resignation spread quickly, bringing a parade of shocked colleagues to my cubicle. Many expressed genuine dismay. A few made thinly veiled inquiries about where I was going, and one, Derek, stopped by just to smirk and say, "Guess the golden girl isn't so golden after all." I maintained a professional facade, neither confirming nor denying the rumors that inevitably sprung up. I was going to a competitor. I'd had a nervous breakdown. I'd been poached by Mitchell themselves. Let them speculate. I had work to do. True to my word, I documented everything meticulously. Project statuses, client preferences, technical challenges, and workarounds. I created guides that even Ethan might be able to follow, though I had my doubts. I trained my team on the nuances of the Mitchell account, knowing they would be the ones actually keeping it afloat after I left. Maria cornered me in the break room on my third to last day. "This is bullshit, Jess," she said in a fierce whisper. "Everyone knows you should have gotten that job. Half the dev team is updating their resumes." I stirred my coffee carefully. I appreciate the support, but I don't want anyone making career decisions based on my situation. "It's not just your situation," Maria insisted. "It's what it represents. If someone like you, the person who literally saved the company, can get passed over for the boss's kid, what hope do the rest of us have?" Her words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't just making a decision for myself. I was setting an example, whether I wanted to or not. Sometimes the best way forward is elsewhere, I said finally. That's true for me, and it might be true for others. But everyone has to decide that for themselves. Maria looked at me intently. Do you have something lined up? Because my brother works at Apex, and they're always looking for project managers with your skills. I smiled. I'm exploring options, but thank you for thinking of me. The truth was, I did have something lined up, something I wasn't ready to share with anyone at Meridian yet, not until all the pieces were in place. Those pieces started falling into place during my final week. First, the call from Victoria Mitchell, ostensibly to discuss a minor issue with the new system, but really to ask me directly about my departure. Robert says you're leaving to pursue other opportunities, she said, skepticism evident in her tone. Given how committed you've been to our account, I find that surprising. I chose my words carefully. Meridian is restructuring their client services department. With those changes, I felt it was the right time for me to explore new directions. Restructuring, Victoria repeated flatly. Would this restructuring have anything to do with Robert's son suddenly appearing in our status meetings? I hesitated. I had promised myself I wouldn't badmouth Meridian or Robert, but I also wouldn't lie, especially not to Victoria, who had placed her trust in me. Ethan Miller is taking over as Director of Client Relations, I said neutrally. He'll be your primary contact going forward. Victoria was silent for a long moment. I see, she said finally. And how much experience does Ethan have with enterprise? Software implementation. I believe he came from a marketing background, I replied, which was the most diplomatic way I could phrase it. Another pause. Jessica, would you be willing to meet me for coffee this week, off the record? My heart beat faster. This was unexpected and potentially complicated. I think that would be fine, I said carefully. As long as we're clear that I can't discuss confidential Meridian information. Of course, Victoria agreed. How about Thursday at 2, the Bluestone Cafe on 7th? Thursday was my second to last day at Meridian. I'll be there, I promised. The Bluestone was busy when I arrived, but Victoria had secured a corner table, partially screened from the rest of the cafe by a large potted plant, a good choice for a conversation that needed privacy. Victoria stood to greet me, shaking my hand firmly. Thank you for coming, Jessica. I ordered you a latte. I hope that's acceptable. Perfect, thank you. I settled into the chair across from her, curious about what this meeting was really about. Victoria didn't waste time on small talk. I've worked with many vendors over the years, she began, stirring her tea. Some good, some bad, a few exceptional. You fall into that last category. I inclined my head, accepting the compliment but waiting for her to continue. The work you did for Mitchell wasn't just a software implementation, she continued. It was a complete transformation of our operations. You understood our business in ways our own managers sometimes don't. She set down her spoon. So when I hear you're leaving Meridian right after completing this massive project and being replaced by the CEO's son with no relevant experience, I have concerns. I sipped my latte, buying time. I understand those concerns, but I assure you the implementation is solid. The team that will be supporting you knows the system inside and out. For now, Victoria agreed. But what happens in 6 months when we need modifications? When our business evolves and the software needs to keep pace? Will Ethan Miller understand what we need, the way you did? It was the question I'd been wrestling with myself. The honest answer was no, but I couldn't say that. Meridian has talented people, I said diplomatically. I'm confident they'll continue to provide Mitchell with excellent service. Victoria studied me, then laughed softly. You're being very professional. I respect that. She leaned forward. Let me be direct, Jessica. Mitchell isn't just concerned about losing you as our contact. We're concerned about the future of Meridian itself. That surprised me. The company is on solid financial footing now that the Mitchell contract is renewed. For the moment, Victoria conceded. But companies don't succeed based on last quarter's results. They succeed based on leadership, talent, and vision. She fixed me with an intent gaze. When top performers leave after being passed over for less qualified candidates, it's often a sign of deeper problems. She wasn't wrong. I'd seen the pattern play out at other companies, a decline that started not with financial problems, but with talent drain. Victoria, I said carefully, if you have concerns about Meridian's ability to service your account, you should discuss them with Robert or Ethan directly. I intend to, she assured me. But first, I wanted to ask what? Your plans are after Meridian. There it was, the real purpose of this meeting. I hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. Victoria seemed to sense my reluctance. Let me be even more direct. Would you consider consulting for Mitchell directly? We would value having your expertise available as we continue to refine our systems. The offer took me by surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. I would need to check my Meridian contract for non-compete clauses, I said, stalling. Victoria waved a hand dismissively. Our legal team can handle that. The question is whether you'd be interested. Would I be interested in working directly, with Mitchell bypassing Meridian entirely? The thought was tempting and complicated. It would certainly send a message to Robert about my value. But was it what I really wanted? I'm exploring several options right now, I said, which was true. Consulting is definitely one possibility I'm considering. Victoria nodded, seeming satisfied with this non-committal answer. Good, because I'd like to make you a formal offer. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Take this, review it, and let me know what you think. No rush. We can discuss next steps after you've officially left Meridian. I accepted the folder, feeling its weight both literally and figuratively. Thank you for thinking of me. It's not charity, Jessica. It's good business. Victoria checked her watch. I should get back to the office, but before I go, she fixed me with that direct gaze again. Whatever you decide about our offer, I hope you won't settle for less than you're worth. Talent like yours is rare, and companies that fail to recognize it don't deserve to keep it. With that, she stood, shook my hand again, and left, leaving me with a folder containing what I suspected was a very generous consulting offer, and a lot to think about. I didn't open the folder until I got home that evening. When I did, I let out a low whistle. The offer was indeed generous, nearly double my Meridian salary for a 6-month engagement with the possibility of extension. The scope was focused on optimizing the systems I'd already implemented and training Mitchell's internal team to maintain them long-term. It was a good offer, a flattering offer. And yet, I set the folder aside and pulled out my notebook, the one where I'd been sketching out my own plans. Plans that had started as vague ideas that weekend after Robert's betrayal, but had been crystallizing ever since. Plans that went beyond simply finding another job or even consulting. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. How was the mysterious coffee meeting? Are you a corporate spy now? I smiled and texted back, not yet, but I got an interesting offer. Claire. Details. Me. Consulting gig with Mitchell. Good money, 6 months. Claire. Are you going to take it? I stared at the phone, considering. A month ago, I would have jumped at this opportunity. Now I wasn't so sure. Me. Still thinking, need to weigh all options. Claire. What options? This sounds perfect. It did sound perfect on paper. Validation from a respected client, financial security, a chance to continue the work I'd started. But something held me back, a nagging sense that taking this offer would be playing it safe, reacting to Robert's decision rather than truly charting my own course. Me. Let's talk tomorrow. Coming over for dinner? Claire. Obviously. 7 p.m. Ben's making his famous risotto. I put down my phone and turned back to my notebook. On one page, I'd written vision at the top, followed by bullet points that outlined not just what I wanted to do next, but what I wanted to build. Not just a job or a consultancy, but something that could grow beyond me. Something that could change the way the industry approached software implementation by focusing on the human side, not just the technical. It was ambitious. Maybe too ambitious. Starting a business wasn't just risky, it was terrifying. I had savings, but they wouldn't last forever. I had experience, but never as a founder. I had ideas, but ideas weren't the same as a solid business plan. And yet, as I flipped back through the pages of notes I'd been making all week, market analysis, potential client profiles, service offerings, I felt a surge of excitement that consulting for Mitchell, however prestigious, didn't inspire. My final day at Meridian arrived with little fanfare. I declined the traditional goodbye lunch, opting instead for a quiet happy hour with my core team the evening before. I spent the day completing handover notes, returning company property, and exchanging contact information with colleagues I actually wanted to stay in touch with. Robert didn't make an appearance, which was just as well. Our paths had carefully avoided crossing since my resignation. Ethan, on the other hand, had been a constant, hovering presence, attempting to extract as much knowledge as possible before I left. I'd been professional but not enthusiastic, teaching him what he needed to know without the extra insights and shortcuts I'd shared with my team. At 4:30, I packed the last of my personal items into a small box, the plant Claire had given me when I first got the job, a few framed photos, my collection of fancy tea that had sustained me through late nights. 4 years of my professional life reduced to items that fit in a shoebox. It was both sad and strangely liberating. As I signed my final paperwork in HR, the department head, Jim, gave me a knowing look. "You know," he said casually, "when I processed Ethan's hiring paperwork, I couldn't help but notice his salary is 20% higher than what was budgeted for the director position." I stared at him, processing this information. 20% higher than what Derek was making? Jim nodded, lips pressed in a thin line. Robert said it was necessary to attract executive talent. He made air quotes around the phrase. Another piece of the pattern, clearer than ever. Not only had I been passed over despite earning the position, but Ethan was being paid significantly more than would have been offered to me. "Thank you for telling me that, Jim," I said quietly. He shrugged. "I probably shouldn't have. But some things just aren't right, you know?" I did know. And that knowledge solidified something in me as I walked out of Meridian's doors for the last time. The consulting offer from Mitchell sat in my bag, still tempting. But so did my notebook, full of plans, dreams that went beyond being someone else's resource. Claire and Ben's house was warm and inviting when I arrived that evening, the smell of saffron and white wine filling the air as Ben stirred his risotto. My nieces, Emma and Lily, tackled me with hugs before running back to their game in the Thai living room. "So?" Claire demanded as soon as we had wine glasses in hand. "How was the last day of corporate servitude?" I laughed. Anticlimactic. Lots of paperwork, awkward goodbyes, and one very interesting revelation courtesy of Jim in HR. I told them about Ethan's inflated salary, watching Claire's expression shift from curiosity to outrage. "That's it," she declared. "You have to sue them. That's blatant discrimination." Ben, ever the pragmatist, shook his head as he stirred. The risotto. "Lawsuits are expensive, time-consuming, and professionally risky. The question is whether it would actually help Jess move forward or just keep her stuck in the past." He had a point. As satisfying as it might be to hold Robert accountable, did I want to spend the next year or more fighting that battle? Or did I want to use that energy to build something new? "I've been thinking about Mitchell's offer," I said, changing the subject slightly. It's very generous. Claire perked up. So you're taking it? I took a sip of wine. I'm considering it, but I've been considering something else too. I pulled out my notebook and slid it across the counter toward Claire. Take a look. She flipped it open, skimming my notes with increasing interest. Jess, this is a business plan. You want to start your own company? Ben looked up from the stove, eyebrows raised in surprise and what looked like respect. I'm thinking about it, I admitted. The Mitchell offer would be the safe choice. Good money, familiar work, instant credibility. But it would still be working within the same system, the system that just showed me exactly how it values my contributions. Claire continued reading, nodding slowly. System-centered solutions. She read the tentative company name I'd scribbled at the top of one page. Focus on human-centered design for enterprise software. Client empowerment through education. Building internal capacity rather than dependency. She looked up at me. This is really thought out. It's just ideas at this point, I said, feeling suddenly vulnerable. But yes, I've been thinking about it seriously, especially after today. What happened today? Ben asked, coming to look over Claire's shoulder at my notes. I took a deep breath. I realized that no matter how good the Mitchell offer is, taking it would mean I'm letting Robert's decision define my next move. I'd be reacting, not choosing. Claire nodded slowly. And this, she tapped the notebook, this would be choosing. Exactly. I felt a surge of excitement just saying it out loud. It would be terrifying and risky, and probably 1,000 times harder than I'm imagining. But it would be mine. Ben turned back to the risotto, giving it a final stir before taking it off the heat. You know, he said thoughtfully, when I left corporate law to start my own practice, everyone thought I was crazy. Giving up partner track for the uncertainty of hanging out my own shingle? He shook his head. 5 years later, I make more money, work with clients I actually like, and haven't had to wear a tie in 3 years. Just saying. Claire squeezed my hand. What does your gut tell you, Jess? I closed my eyes, letting myself really feel the two paths before me. The Mitchell offer represented validation, security, a clear statement to Robert and Meridian that they had undervalued me. My own company represented the unknown. Terrifying, yes, but also thrilling in a way I hadn't felt in years. My gut says I need to stop letting other people define my worth, I said finally, opening my eyes. And the only way to truly do that is to build something of my own, on my own terms. Claire's face broke into a wide smile. Well then, I think this calls for a toast. She raised her glass. To systems-centered solutions and its brilliant founder, who's about to show Meridian exactly what they lost. Ben raised his glass as, well, to new beginnings. I clinked my glass against theirs, feeling a mix of terror and exhilaration that told me I was making the right choice. Because sometimes the most powerful recognition is the one that comes from within, the moment you see your own worth clearly, without needing anyone else's validation to confirm it. And sometimes the most important decision isn't which opportunity to take, but which pattern to break. The first month of entrepreneurship was nothing like I'd imagined. After 4 years in Meridian's sleek downtown office with its ergonomic chairs, premium coffee, an IT department that fixed problems before you knew you had them, my new headquarters felt like a step backward. The spare bedroom in my apartment, a desk from IKEA that had taken 3 frustrating hours to assemble, and a coffee maker that seemed determined to either underbrew or create something that could strip paint. But it was mine, all mine. I'd officially turned down Victoria's consulting offer a week after my final day at Meridian. The conversation had been both terrifying and liberating. I'm flattered by your offer, I told her over the phone, my voice steadier than my hands. But I've decided to start my own firm. A brief silence followed. I see. Victoria said finally. "And what will this firm do exactly?" I took a deep breath and gave her the elevator pitch I'd been refining for days. System-centered solutions will specialize in human-centered software implementation, focusing on building client capabilities rather than creating vendor dependencies. Instead of just installing systems for clients, we'll teach them to understand, maintain, and eventually evolve those systems themselves. Another pause. "So you're proposing to make yourself obsolete?" I laughed, surprised by her directness. "Eventually, yes, but companies' needs evolve. Once they master their current systems, they'll need help with the next evolution. I'd rather have clients who return because they want to, not because they're trapped." Interesting. I could almost hear Victoria thinking through the implications. "And have you secured any clients for this revolutionary approach?" This was the moment of truth, the reason my stomach had been in knots all morning. "Not yet, but I was hoping Mitchell might consider being my first." I held my breath, waiting for her response. Victoria Mitchell wasn't known for impulsive decisions or charity. If she said no, my fledgling business might be over before it began. "Send me a proposal," she said finally. "Something concrete that outlines what you'd do differently as a consultant versus as the owner of SCS. I can't promise anything, but I'll review it." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. I thanked her profusely and promised to have the proposal to her by the end of the week. After hanging up, I'd alternated between elation and panic. I had a shot. A real shot at landing a major client. Right out of the gate. But now I needed to deliver a proposal that would convince Victoria to take a chance on a company that barely existed. For the next 3 days, I barely slept. I researched competitors, refined my service offerings, created detailed project plans, and crafted a proposal that highlighted not just what I would do, but why it would benefit Mitchell specifically. I emphasized the advantage of working with someone who already understood their systems intimately, but would now be focused solely on their success, not balancing their needs against a roster of other clients. I submitted the proposal on Thursday afternoon, then spent Friday refreshing my email every 5 minutes. By Saturday, with no response, I'd convinced myself I'd made a terrible mistake. By Sunday, I was updating my resume and researching job openings. Then Monday morning, my phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen sent my heart racing. "Jessica," she said without preamble, "I've reviewed your proposal. It's ambitious." I couldn't tell from her tone whether that was good or bad. "Thank you?" "The board is concerned about risk," she continued. "You're essentially a one-person operation with no track record as a business." My heart sank. This was the rejection I'd been bracing for. "However," Victoria added, "I've convinced them to approve a 3-month trial engagement, not the full scope you proposed, but enough to demonstrate your approach. If it goes well, we can discuss expanding the relationship." I nearly dropped the phone. That would be wonderful," I managed to say, struggling to sound professional rather than desperate with relief. "Good. My assistant will email you the paperwork. I expect you to start next Monday." She paused. "And Jessica? Don't make me regret going to bat for you on this." After we hung up, I did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I jumped, up and down on my bed, letting out a squeal of pure joy. I had a client. A real, paying client. System-centered solutions was officially in business. The reality of what I'd just committed to hit me about 20 minutes later. I was now solely responsible for everything. Not just the technical work, but contracts, invoicing, insurance, taxes, and 100 other details I'd never had to think about as an employee. I needed help, and fast. I called Ben, who as a small practice lawyer had gone through this transition himself. "Congratulations," he said when I shared my news. "Now the real work begins. Let's get lunch tomorrow. I'll bring my starting a business checklist." That lunch turned into a crash course in entrepreneurship. Ben helped me navigate the immediate legal requirements and introduced me to his accountant, who explained the tax implications of my new venture. By the end of the week, I had a legally registered business, a proper business bank account, liability insurance, and the beginnings of an understanding of quarterly estimated taxes. What I didn't have was an office, business cards, a website, or any of the trappings I'd always associated with real businesses. But when Monday rolled around and I walked into Mitchell's headquarters for my first day as a consultant, then a Meridian employee, none of that seemed to matter. Victoria introduced me to the department heads not as a vendor, but as a partner who would be helping them take full ownership of their systems. The first 3 months at Mitchell were intense, but exhilarating. I split my time between hands-on technical work and what I called knowledge transfer, essentially teaching Mitchell's team to understand the systems I'd implemented. Rather than holding back information to make myself indispensable, as many consultants did, I documented everything, created training materials, and encouraged questions. It was a radically different approach from what they were used to, and initially met with some skepticism. The IT department, in particular, seemed suspicious of my motives. Why would I deliberately teach them skills that would make my services unnecessary? Because that's not where my value lies, I explained during a particularly tense meeting with the IT director, a gruff man named Harold who'd been with Mitchell for 20 years. My value isn't in being the only person who knows how to fix problems. It's in helping you avoid those problems in the first place. Harold had crossed his arms, clearly unconvinced. And when we don't need you anymore, what then? I smiled. Then you call me when you're ready for the next evolution. When your business needs change, and they will, you'll need someone who understands both where you've been and where you're going. It took time, but gradually, the skepticism faded. As Mitchell's team became more confident in their ability to manage the systems, they started suggesting improvements, small tweaks at first, then more substantial enhancements. Instead of dismissing these ideas or insisting they needed me to implement them, I created workshops where they could safely experiment and learn from their mistakes. Victoria observed this transformation with growing approval. Our weekly status meetings evolved from standard project updates to strategic discussions about how technology could better serve Mitchell's business goals. You know, she remarked. During one such meeting, about 2 months into the engagement, Meridian offered to cut their support fees by 30% last week. My stomach dropped. Despite all the progress, I was still a new business, and Mitchell was still my only client. If they went back to Meridian, I told them we weren't interested, Victoria continued, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Price isn't the issue. They still don't understand that we don't want to be dependent on our vendors. They see that as a feature, not a bug. Relief flooded through me. Thank you for the vote of confidence. Victoria waved away my gratitude. It's not charity, Jessica. This approach is working for us. She consulted her calendar. Our 3-month trial period ends in 3 weeks. I think it's time to discuss extending the engagement. The extension she proposed the following week was beyond my wildest expectations. A full-year contract with an expanded scope that would have me working not just with the headquarters team, but with Mitchell's regional offices as well. The fee structure was generous enough that I could finally consider expanding, perhaps hiring an assistant or even another consultant. This is amazing, I said, reviewing the contract. Thank you, Victoria. Don't thank me yet, she replied, her expression turning serious. This expanded scope means you can't do everything yourself anymore. You'll need to build a team that can deliver on your vision. That's a different challenge than being a solo consultant. She was right, of course. I'd been so focused on getting the business off the ground that I hadn't given much thought to growth. The prospect was both exciting and terrifying. Could I find people who shared my philosophy? Would I be a good manager? Could I maintain quality if I wasn't doing everything myself? These questions kept me up at night as I began the search for my first employee. I created job descriptions, posted on industry forums, and reached out to my network. The response was overwhelming. Far more applications than I had anticipated, many from exceptionally qualified candidates. One name in particular caught my eye: Maria Chen, my former lead developer at Meridian. We met for coffee the next day. Maria looked both excited and nervous as she slid into the booth across from me. I wasn't sure if contacting me was appropriate, she admitted, since I'm still at Meridian and all. Why wouldn't it be? I asked, genuinely curious. She fidgeted with her napkin. Things are tense there since you left. Robert's been on the warpath, especially since the Mitchell contract modification. I raised an eyebrow. What modification? You don't know? Maria looked surprised. Mitchell dramatically reduced their support contract with Meridian last month. Robert was furious, blamed the account team for not maintaining the relationship properly. She made air quotes around the phrase. Of course, everyone knows it has more to do with you working directly with them now. I processed this information with mixed feelings. I hadn't deliberately set out to take business from Meridian, but it was a natural consequence of my approach. As Mitchell's team became more self-sufficient, they naturally needed less vendor support. Anyway, Maria continued, when I saw your job posting, I couldn't help but apply. The stuff you're doing sounds amazing, Jess. Teaching clients rather than keeping them dependent? Actually caring about whether they can use the systems we build? That's the kind of work I want to do. Her enthusiasm was infectious. You'd be taking a risk, I warned. SCS is still new. I can't offer the same stability as Meridian. Maria laughed. Stability? Ethan's reorganizing the department. Again. Third time in 2 months. Nobody feels stable there anymore. I leaned forward, suddenly curious. How's he doing? Really? Maria's expression turned grimly amused. Let's just say Mitchell isn't the only account that's scaled back their relationship with Meridian since you left. Turns out charm and a famous last name aren't substitutes for actually understanding the business. I shouldn't have felt satisfaction at this news, but I did. A small, vindicating proof that I'd been right about my value all along. But more important than that vindication was the opportunity sitting across from me. A talented developer who shared my vision and already understood my approach. When can you start? I asked. Maria's face lit up. You're offering me the job? Just like that? I've worked with you. I know your capabilities and your character. You were at the top of my list before you even applied. 2 weeks later, Systems-Centered Solutions had its second employee. We couldn't afford a proper office yet, so I converted the rest of my spare bedroom into a workspace for Maria. It was cramped and far from ideal, but the energy of building something new made up for the lack of amenities. With Maria handling more of the technical implementation, I could focus on business development. Victoria had introduced me to several of her industry contacts, and while not all of them were ready to take a chance on a new firm, a few were intrigued by our approach. By the end of our 3rd month, we had signed 2 additional clients, smaller than Mitchell, but enough to validate that our model had broader appeal. The growth was exhilarating, but it also brought new challenges. With multiple clients and projects, I needed systems to track work, manage finances, and ensure quality. I found myself working even longer hours than I had at Meridian, not because anyone was demanding it, but because this was mine, and its success or failure rested entirely on my shoulders. You need to pace yourself, Claire warned during one of our Sunday brunches. You left Meridian partly because of the unsustainable hours, remember? Don't recreate the same problem in your own company. She had a point, but it was hard to step back when everything felt so precarious, so dependent on my personal effort. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was teaching clients to avoid dependency while creating a business that was completely dependent on me. This reality hit home hard when I came down with a severe case of flu in the 5th month of operations. For 3 days, I was too ill to even check email. Maria handled the technical emergencies, but client calls went unanswered, proposals weren't finished, and billing was delayed. When I recovered, I found myself facing concerned clients and a backlog of work that took weeks to clear. It was a wake-up call. I needed to build a business that could function without me, at least for short periods. The solution came from an unexpected source. One morning, I received an email from a name I didn't immediately recognize, Tina Rodriguez. The message was brief and to the point. Jessica, I was Robert's executive assistant at Meridian for 8 years. I hear you're building something new and might need administrative support. I'd love to discuss how I could help. My contact info is below. I stared at the email in surprise. Tina had always been efficient and pleasant during my time at Meridian, but we hadn't been particularly close. Why would she reach out now? Curiosity got the better of me, and I called her that afternoon. Thanks for getting back to me, Tina said warmly. I hope this isn't too forward, but I've been following your progress through the grapevine. What you're building sounds exciting. Thank you, I said, still puzzled. But I'm surprised you'd be interested in leaving Meridian. As Robert's assistant, you're pretty central to operations there. Tina sighed. I was central to operations when Robert was actually running operations. These days, he's more concerned with appearances than substance. And Ethan, she trailed, off diplomatically. I filled in the blank. Not a great boss? Let's just say his management style doesn't bring out the best in people, Tina replied carefully. Honestly, Jessica, the culture has changed since you left. A lot of good people have either quit or checked out mentally. This was valuable intelligence, but it still didn't explain why a C-suite executive assistant would be interested in joining a startup with uncertain prospects. I'm flattered by your interest, Tina, but I have to ask, wouldn't this be a step down for you? I can't match your Meridian salary, and the work would be different. Different is exactly what I'm looking for, Tina said firmly. I've spent my career supporting executives who take credit for other people's work. I'd rather support someone who's building something worthwhile, even if it means a pay cut. Her candor was refreshing, and the more we talked, the more I realized what an asset she could be. As Robert's assistant, Tina had managed his calendar, coordinated complex meetings, handled correspondence with major clients, and kept the executive suite running smoothly. Those skills were exactly what I needed as SCS grew. We agreed to a trial period, 3 days a week at first, with the possibility of increasing to full-time if the arrangement worked for both of us. Tina would handle administrative tasks, client, communications, and office management, freeing me to focus on strategy and business development. It was the best decision I could have made. Within weeks, Tina had transformed our operations, creating systems for everything from client onboarding to expense tracking, establishing consistent communication protocols, and gently but firmly ensuring that I maintained some semblance of work-life balance. You have a client dinner at 7, she'd remind me, and you'll be more effective if you take a break before then. Go home, shower, change, and clear your head. With Tina managing the day-to-day operations and Maria leading the technical implementation, I could finally step back enough to think strategically about the future of SCS. And increasingly, that future looked promising. Word was spreading about our unique approach, leading to inquiries from companies that would never have considered us in our first months. 6 months after leaving Meridian, System-Centered Solutions had 4 employees. We'd added another developer, 7 clients, and a small but growing reputation for excellence in our niche. We'd even moved into a real office. Nothing fancy, just a modest suite in a converted warehouse, but it had proper desks, a conference room, and a coffee maker that functioned reliably. It wasn't all smooth sailing. Cash flow was a constant concern. Some clients took longer to adapt to our approach than others, and the hours were still long, though more varied and fulfilling than they had been at Meridian. But for all the challenges, I had created something that felt meaningful, a company that operated according to my values rather than in spite of them, a place where talent was recognized and rewarded based on contribution, not connections. Business model built on empowering clients rather than exploiting their dependencies. I was in the office late one evening, reviewing our quarterly projections, when my phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Turn on Channel 8, News Now." Curious, I found the remote for the small TV in our break area and switched it on. The news anchor was in the middle of a business segment. Significant downsizing at Meridian Technologies, with sources reporting that up to 30% of staff may be affected. CEO Robert Miller issued a statement citing strategic restructuring to align with market conditions. But industry analysts suggest the company has been struggling since losing several major accounts earlier this year. I turned up the volume as the anchor continued. Among those accounts is Mitchell Industries, which reduced its contract with Meridian by over 60% 6 months ago. Mitchell's Chief Innovation Officer, Victoria Mitchell, declined to comment specifically on the Meridian relationship, but stated that the company is focusing on building internal capabilities rather than outsourcing critical functions, a strategy that has already yielded significant operational improvements. The segment ended and I switched off the TV, feeling a complex mix of emotions. I hadn't set out to hurt Meridian. My goal had been to build something better, not to tear down my former employer. And yet, the strategic restructuring was at least partly a consequence of the approach I'd pioneered at Mitchell, which had proven so successful that other clients were following suit. I wondered briefly if Robert recognized the irony, that the promotion he'd denied me might have helped Meridian adapt to changing client expectations, potentially avoiding this downsizing. I wondered if Ethan, with his executive title and inflated salary, would be among those affected, or if familial connection would shield him from the consequences of his inadequate leadership. My phone buzzed again with another text from Claire. "Are you watching? Karma is a beautiful thing, sis." I started to type a response, but paused, reflecting on the past 6 months. Was this karma? Perhaps, but it felt less like divine retribution, and more like the natural consequence of choices. Robert's choice to prioritize nepotism over merit, and my choice to build something that better served clients' needs. My true victory wasn't in Meridian's stumble, but in SES's success, in creating a company that reflected my values and validated my approach, in proving both to myself and to the market that there was a better way to do business. "I finally," replied to Claire. "Yes, just saw it. Mixed feelings. Drinks this weekend. So much to tell you." Then I returned to my projections, focusing not on Meridian's past, but on SCS's future. We were growing faster than anticipated, which brought both opportunities and challenges. We needed to hire more staff, possibly expand our office space, maybe even consider opening a second location closer to our West Coast clients. The path ahead wasn't clear or certain, but it was ours to define. And for all the late nights and anxieties that came with entrepreneurship, I wouldn't trade this hard-won independence for any corner office or executive title that had been dangled before me. Sometimes the most meaningful success isn't getting what you thought you wanted, but discovering what you actually needed and having the courage to create it for yourself. It was a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after I'd started Systems-Centered Solutions, when Tina knocked on my office door with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You have a visitor," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "He doesn't have an appointment." I glanced at my calendar, already packed with client calls and team meetings. "Who is it?" Tina hesitated. "Robert Miller." The name hit me like a physical force. Robert Miller, my former boss. The man who had broken his promise and given my earned promotion to his son. The CEO of Meridian Technologies, or what remained of it, after the strategic restructuring that had dominated industry gossip for months. "What does he want?" I asked, although I could guess. He wouldn't say, just that it's urgent and personal. Tina's expression softened. "I can tell him you're in meetings all day if you'd prefer." The offer was tempting. Part of me wanted to make Robert wait, to give him a taste of the dismissive treatment he'd so often given others. But curiosity won out. What could possibly bring Robert Miller to my doorstep after a year of silence? "No, it's fine. Send him in." I stood, smoothing my skirt and squaring my shoulders. Whatever this was about, I would face it on my feet. Robert looked different than I remembered. His normally impeccable suit seemed slightly loose, as if he'd lost weight. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a posture that spoke of strain and exhaustion. But his expression was the same, that practiced blend of authority and charm. That had once seemed so impressive to me. "Jessica," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for seeing me." I shook his hand briefly, gesturing to the visitor's chair. "What can I do for you, Robert?" He settled into the chair, glancing around my office with poorly disguised assessment. It wasn't the corner office he'd once promised me, just a modest room with functional furniture and a view of the street below. But it was mine, earned without false promises or nepotism. "You've done well for yourself," he said, nodding toward the framed client testimonials on my wall. "Systems-centered solutions. Catchy name." "Thank you," I replied evenly. "But I doubt you came here to compliment my branding." Robert smiled thinly. Direct as ever. He leaned forward, clasping his hands. "I'll get right to it then. I want to talk about Mitchell Industries." Of course he did. Mitchell had been Meridian's biggest client before I left. The account I'd saved, only to have the promised reward snatched away. Now Mitchell was SCS's flagship client, the cornerstone of our growing reputation for transformative implementations. "What about Mitchell?" I asked, though I already knew where this was headed. "Their contract with Meridian is up for renewal next month." Robert's smile tightened. Or rather, what's left of their contract. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "Victoria has made it clear that unless something changes dramatically, they won't be renewing at all." He spread his hands. "Which would be problematic for us?" Problematic was an understatement. After the downsizing, losing Mitchell completely would be devastating for Meridian, but that wasn't my concern anymore. "I'm not sure what this has to do with me," I said coolly. "Mitchell makes their own decisions about their vendors." Robert's practiced smile faltered. "Don't play naive, Jessica. It doesn't suit you. We both know Mitchell's shift toward your client empowerment approach came directly from your influence." He wasn't wrong. The methodology I'd developed at SCS had transformed Mitchell's relationship with all their technology vendors, not just Meridian. But I hadn't forced that change. I'd simply offered a better alternative to the dependency model that Meridian and its competitors relied on. "If Mitchell prefers our approach, that's their choice," I said. "Just as it was your choice to put Ethan in charge of their account, despite his lack of qualifications." The jab landed. Robert's jaw tightened momentarily before he regained his composure. "Ancient history. Ethan has moved on to other opportunities." I suppressed a smile. So the Golden Sun hadn't survived the restructuring after all. Interesting. "What exactly are you asking for, Robert?" He leaned forward again, dropping the pretense of casual conversation. "I want you to partner with Meridian on the Mitchell renewal. A joint proposal that lets Mitchell keep working with you while maintaining some level of relationship with us." The request was so unexpected that I actually laughed. "You're joking." "I'm dead serious." There was no trace of humor in his expression now. "Meridian needs this contract, Jessica. We can make it worth your while. A generous percentage of the contract value, public recognition of your methodology, whatever you want." The irony was almost too perfect. A year ago, this man had dismissed my value and broken his promise of advancement. Now he was practically begging for my help, offering recognition he should have given when it actually mattered. Why would I do that? I asked, genuinely curious about his reasoning. SCS is doing well. We don't need Meridian's recognition or resources. Because despite everything, you built your career at Meridian. Those were your colleagues, your team. He paused, watching me carefully. And because 38 families depend on that contract. 38 people who had nothing to do with my decision about the director position. It was a calculated appeal to my conscience, and I resented its effectiveness. The employees who remained at Meridian after the downsizing weren't responsible for Robert's poor leadership. Many were former colleagues I respected. I'll think about it, I said finally. Send me the details of what you're proposing, and I'll consider it. That's all I can promise. Relief flashed across Robert's face. Thank you. That's all I'm asking. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. I brought an initial. Proposal. Take your time reviewing it. I accepted the folder without opening it. Is that all? He stood, buttoning his jacket. Just one more thing. His expression shifted, becoming almost sincere. For what it's worth, I made a mistake with the director position. You were the right choice. I see that clearly now. The admission should have felt vindicating. Instead, it just felt hollow. Too little, too late. Goodbye, Robert, I said, standing to show him out. As soon as he left, Tina appeared in the doorway, eyebrows raised in silent question. Meridian wants to partner with us on Mitchell's contract renewal, I explained, setting the folder on my desk. Apparently, they're desperate. Tina let out a low whistle. Well, that's unexpected. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. I glanced at the folder, torn between curiosity and caution. Schedule me some time to review this tonight, and let's move the team meeting up. I want to discuss it with Maria and the others before making any decisions. The team meeting that afternoon was animated, to say the least. Maria was especially vocal, her usual calm professionalism giving way to genuine outrage. Are you seriously considering this? She demanded, jabbing a finger at Robert's proposal, which I'd shared with the core team. After everything they did? I'm considering all options, I replied evenly. That's what responsible business owners do. Maria scoffed. Robert doesn't care about partnership. He just wants to leech off our reputation to save his own skin. She wasn't wrong. The proposal outlined a joint implementation methodology. That was essentially SCS's approach with Meridian's name attached. We would do most of the work while Meridian would retain client relationship management and 65% of the contract value. The terms would need significant revision, I acknowledged. But there could be advantages for us too. Meridian still has name recognition and resources we don't. Resources they're rapidly burning through, Tina pointed out. Their stock dropped another 15% last quarter. I nodded, absorbing this information. I'd been so focused on building SCS that I hadn't been closely tracking Meridian's continued decline. What about our other clients? Asked Evan, our newest developer. How would they feel about us partnering with a traditional vendor like Meridian? Doesn't it undermine our whole client empowerment philosophy? It was a valid concern. SCS had built its reputation on being different from conventional vendors like Meridian. Would a partnership compromise that identity? Look, I said finally, I'm not making any decisions today. I promised Robert I'd consider the proposal, and I will. But I want all of you to know that whatever I decide, it will be based on what's best for SCS, our clients, and our team, not on any personal history with Meridian. After the meeting, I stayed late, poring over the proposal in detail. The more I read, the more I understood the depths of Meridian's desperation. Between the lines of corporate jargon and optimistic projections was a clear message. Without Mitchell, Meridian might not survive. Part of me, a small, vindictive part I wasn't proud of, felt a surge of satisfaction at this reversal of fortune. Robert, who had once held all the power in our relationship, was now essentially at my mercy. But that satisfaction quickly gave way to more complex emotions. I thought about the employees at Meridian. People like Maria had been once. Talented. Professionals just trying to do good work within a flawed system. They didn't deserve to suffer for Robert's poor leadership or Ethan's incompetence. Still undecided, I locked up the office and headed home. The streets were quiet. Most businesses already closed for the night. As I waited at a traffic light, my phone rang. Claire, checking in as she often did when she knew I was working late. "You won't believe who came to see me today," I told her after we'd exchanged greetings. "Who?" "Robert Miller." Claire's gasp was audible even through the phone. The nerve. What did that snake want? I explained the situation as the light changed and I continued driving. "Let me get this straight," Claire said when I'd finished. "The man who passed you over for his unqualified son, who broke his explicit promise to you, who essentially forced you to leave and start your own company, now wants you to save his company?" "That's about the size of it," I confirmed, pulling into my apartment complex. "And you're actually considering it?" Disbelief colored her voice. I sighed, parking and turning off the engine. "It's complicated, Claire. Yes, Robert behaved terribly, but there are innocent people at Meridian who would be hurt if they lose Mitchell completely. So, that's not your responsibility. Their jobs aren't more important than your principles." "It's not that simple," I insisted, though part of me wondered if it actually was. "It seems pretty simple to me," Claire countered. "Robert made his bed. Now he gets to lie in it. End of story." But it wasn't the end of the story, at least not yet. Over the next few days, I found myself increasingly conflicted. I reviewed the proposal multiple times, made notes on potential revisions, and even sketched out alternative partnership structures that would be more equitable. I also reached out discreetly to Victoria Mitchell, not to discuss the proposal directly. That would have been unethical, but to get a better sense of Mitchell's plans for their technology vendors. "We're evaluating all our options," Victoria said carefully when we met for lunch. "Our experience with SCS has certainly changed our perspective on vendor relationships." "And Meridian?" I asked, trying to sound merely curious rather than probing. "Are they still in the running?" Victoria's expression turned thoughtful. "They've been making a strong push recently. New methodology, new team leadership, almost as if they've been inspired by your approach." She gave me a knowing look. "Interesting timing, wouldn't you say?" So Robert had already been laying groundwork at Mitchell, positioning Meridian as having evolved. I wondered how much of that evolution was genuine and how much was desperate mimicry of SCS's success. "Very interesting," I agreed neutrally. Victoria took a sip of her water. "Jessica, I value our professional relationship too much to play games. I know Robert approached you about a partnership. He told me himself." That was unexpected. "I see. What I want to know is whether you're seriously considering it." I met her gaze directly. "I'm evaluating all options, Victoria, just as you are." A smile flickered at the corners of her mouth. "Fair enough." She set down her glass. "But let me be clear about something. Mitchell chose to work with SCS because of your vision and your integrity. If that changes, our relationship might need to change as well." The warning was gentle, but unmistakable. Victoria was telling me that partnership with Meridian might cost SCS its most important client, the exact opposite of what Robert was hoping to achieve. As I drove back to the office, Victoria's words echoed in my mind. Your vision and your integrity. Those were the foundations of SCS, the principles that had guided every decision since I'd left Meridian. Was I really willing to compromise them? For a partnership that primarily benefited Robert? My conflicted thoughts were interrupted by a call from Tina. "Sorry to bother you, but there's something you need to know right away," she said without preamble. I just got off the phone with Kim at Lexicon Systems. Lexicon was one of our newer clients, a promising relationship we'd been nurturing for months. "What about Lexicon?" I asked, a note of concern creeping into my voice. "They've been approached by Meridian with a proposal for client-centered implementation services that sounds suspiciously like our methodology." Kim called because she was confused. She thought we might have partnered with Meridian without telling them. I nearly missed a stop sign, braking hard at the last moment. "What?" "It gets worse," Tina continued. "They're undercutting our prices by 25% and promising faster results." Anger flared hot and immediate. While Robert had been in my office talking about partnership, he'd been simultaneously trying to poach our clients by copying our approach. The audacity was breathtaking. "I'll be at the office in 15 minutes, I said, already changing lanes to take a more direct route. "Call Maria and Evan. We need to respond to this immediately." The next few hours were a blur of activity. We called every client to warn them about Meridian's tactics, drafted a formal cease and desist letter regarding our proprietary methodology, and developed a rapid response strategy to counter any further poaching attempts. By the time we finished, it was past midnight. The team had gone home, leaving me alone in the quiet office, staring at Robert's partnership proposal with newfound clarity. This wasn't about saving jobs at Meridian or finding a mutually beneficial collaboration. This was Robert trying to buy time while he systematically undermined SCS. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. Despite the late hour, he answered, on the second ring. "Jessica, I was hoping to hear from you." He sounded pleased, confident even. "I've reviewed your proposal," I said without preamble. "Excellent. I'm eager to hear your thoughts." "My thoughts are that you must think I'm incredibly naive." A pause. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Lexicon Systems, Robert. And I'm guessing they're not the only ones you've approached with your suddenly client-centered services. Were you planning to tell me about that before or after I agreed to partner with you on Mitchell?" Another pause, longer this time. "Business is business, Jessica. You should understand that better than anyone." The casual dismissal of his duplicity infuriated me. "What I understand is that you haven't changed at all. You're still the same person who promised me a promotion and then gave it to your unqualified son. The same person who values loyalty only when it benefits you. That's unfair." "No, what's unfair is you trying to use me to save your relationship with Mitchell while simultaneously trying to destroy what I've built." I took a deep breath, calming myself. "The partnership is off the table, Robert. And if you continue to attempt to copy our methodology or approach our clients, you'll be hearing from our attorneys. Don't make threats you can't back up," he warned, his tone hardening. "Meridian still has resources you can only dream of. You're a small fish, Jessica. Don't forget that." "Maybe," I conceded. "But this small fish has integrity, innovation, and the trust of our clients, none of which you can buy or steal." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Goodbye, Robert. Don't contact me again." I ended the call before he could respond, feeling simultaneously drained and energized. The conflict that had been plaguing me for days was gone, replaced by absolute certainty that I'd made the right decision. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting to inform the team about my decision and Meridian's tactics. The relief on their faces, especially Maria's, confirmed that they'd been worried I might actually agree to the partnership. "So what now?" Evan asked after I'd explained everything. "Meridian is still going after our clients, and they have deeper pockets for marketing and sales." It was a valid concern. Meridian might be struggling, but they still had resources that SCS couldn't match. If this turned into a prolonged battle, we might be outgunned. "Now we do what we've always done," I said firmly. "We focus on our clients, our methodology, and our results. Meridian can try to copy our approach, but they can't replicate our culture or our commitment to client empowerment. The team nodded, but I could sense their lingering concern. Words were easy. Facing a direct assault from a larger competitor was hard, especially for a young company still establishing itself. "I have something else to share," I continued, pulling out a folder of my own. Not Robert's proposal, but a document I'd been working on privately for weeks. "I've been thinking about SCS's future, and I believe it's time for us to be more ambitious." I distributed copies of what I'd been calling our growth strategy, a plan to expand SCS's services beyond implementation into training, certification, and eventually a complete reimagining of enterprise software deployment. This isn't just about competing with Meridian or any other traditional vendor, I explained as the team reviewed the document. It's about creating a new category altogether, one where we're the leaders from day one. The strategy included bringing on specialized staff in training and organizational change management, developing formal certification programs for clients' internal teams, and eventually creating a platform to automate and standardize our approach. "This is big," Maria said, looking up from the document. "Bigger than I thought you were thinking." "It is big," I agreed. "And it will require all of us to stretch beyond our comfort zones. But I believe it's the right direction, not just to counter Meridian's tactics, but to fulfill the vision that SCS was founded on." The room fell silent as everyone digested the implications. This wasn't just about surviving a competitive threat. It was about transforming SCS from a boutique consultancy into something much more significant. "I'm in," Tina said finally, breaking the silence. "This makes sense. It's a natural evolution of what we're already doing." Maria nodded slowly. "It's ambitious, but yeah, I can see it. And it would definitely put us beyond anything Meridian could copy quickly." One by one, the team voiced their support, their initial concern giving way to excitement about the possibilities. By the end of the meeting, the mood had shifted completely. From defensive worry about Meridian's actions to energized focus on our own path forward. As everyone filed out, Tina lingered behind. "That was well played," she said quietly, turning a threat into an opportunity for growth. I smiled. "It wasn't just strategic. I've been thinking about this direction for months. Robert's actions just accelerated the timeline. Still, it's impressive leadership." She handed me a small stack of messages. "By the way, Victoria Mitchell called twice this morning. She'd like to meet with you as soon as possible." Victoria's call wasn't entirely surprising. News traveled fast in our industry, and she'd likely heard about Meridian's aggressive moves. Still, the urgency was concerning. "Did she say what it was about?" Tina shook her head. "Just that it was important and confidential." I checked my watch. The day was already packed with meetings related to our new strategy, but Victoria wouldn't have called twice if it wasn't truly urgent. "See if she can meet for dinner tonight," I decided, "and reschedule my last appointment if necessary." Victoria suggested we meet at a small upscale restaurant known for its private dining rooms, a place where business could be discussed without concern for eavesdroppers. When I arrived, she was already seated, a glass of wine in hand. "Thank you for making time on such short notice," she said as I joined her. "I know you must be busy, especially given Meridian's recent activities." "News travels fast," I observed, accepting the wine list from the server. Victoria waited until I'd ordered and the server had left before continuing. "I received a very interesting call from Robert Miller yesterday. He seemed to believe that you and I had discussed his partnership proposal." I frowned. "I never said." She waved away my concern. "I know you didn't." Robert was fishing, trying to gauge my reaction. I played along, curious to see where he was going with it. "And where was he going with it?" Victoria's expression turned grim. He suggested that if Mitchell didn't renew with Meridian, they would be forced to file a lawsuit against both. SES and Mitchell, claiming intellectual property theft and tortious interference. The threat was as absurd as it was desperate. That's ridiculous. SES's methodology was developed after I left Meridian, and Mitchell made their own business decisions. Of course it's ridiculous, Victoria agreed. But legal battles aren't always about who's right. They're about who can afford to fight the longest. Robert knows SES doesn't have Meridian's resources for a prolonged legal battle. It was a sobering point. Even a baseless lawsuit could drain SES's limited resources and distract us from implementing our growth strategy at a critical time. So, what did you tell him? I asked, curious about Victoria's response to such a transparent threat. A small, satisfied smile played at the corners of her mouth. I told him that Mitchell Industries has an annual legal budget larger than Meridian's entire current market capitalization, and that if he wanted to engage in mutually assured destruction, we were perfectly positioned to oblige him. I couldn't help but laugh at the image of Robert receiving that particular reality check. I imagine he didn't take that well. No, he didn't, Victoria confirmed, her smile widening briefly before her expression turned serious again. But desperate people do desperate things, Jessica. Robert may back down temporarily, but I doubt he's finished. He sees you as both, a threat and a potential lifeline, a dangerous combination. She was right. Robert had already demonstrated that he was willing to play dirty. And now that I'd rejected his partnership offer and threatened legal action of our own, he might become even more aggressive. I appreciate the warning, I said sincerely. And Mitchell's support. Victoria nodded acknowledgement. That brings me to the other reason I wanted to meet. In light of these developments, Mitchell's board has made a decision about our technology vendor relationships going forward. She paused, studying me carefully. We've decided to consolidate all our implementation services with a single partner. The board vote was yesterday. My heart sank. Despite Victoria's apparent support, Mitchell was a large corporation with many stakeholders. If they were consolidating vendors, there was a real possibility they might choose a larger, more established partner than SCS, especially with Meridian threatening legal action. I see, I said, working to keep my expression neutral despite the potential disaster this could represent for SCS. Mitchell still accounted for nearly 40% of our revenue. Losing them would be a devastating blow, especially while we were trying to implement our growth strategy. Victoria must have read the concern in my eyes. Jessica, she said gently, the board voted unanimously to award the consolidated contract to SCS. We're doubling our engagement, effective immediately. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The relief so profound it left me momentarily speechless. There are conditions, Victoria continued. The most significant being that SCS will need to scale quickly to handle the expanded scope. We'll need dedicated teams for each division, more comprehensive training programs, and a formal certification path for our internal staff. It was as if she'd read my growth strategy document directly. The requirements she outlined aligned perfectly with the direction I'd just presented to my team. We can meet those conditions, I said confidently. In fact, we've already been developing plans along exactly those lines. Victoria smiled, seeming unsurprised. I thought you might be. You've always had good instincts for where the industry is headed. She raised her glass. To new beginnings, and to showing Robert Miller what real leadership looks like. As I raised my glass to meet hers, I felt a surge of emotions. Gratitude for Victoria's faith in SCS, pride in what we'd built, and yes, a certain vindication that the approach Robert had dismissed was now not just successful, but ascendant. The expanded Mitchell contract wouldn't just help us weather Meridian's attacks. It would provide the resources we needed to fully implement our growth strategy and establish SCS as a true leader in our field. In his desperate attempt to undermine us, Robert had inadvertently accelerated our growth. Sometimes, I reflected as Victoria and I clinked glasses, the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ahead. 1 year after declining Nexus's offer, I stood at the podium of the Grand Ballroom at the Palmer House Hotel, addressing the inaugural conference of the Independent Publishers Alliance. The room was filled with nearly 300 publishing professionals, editors, agents, publicists, and authors, all united by a commitment to maintaining editorial independence in an increasingly consolidated industry. A year ago, many predicted that small publishers couldn't survive against corporate giants, I told the attentive audience. We were told that consolidation was inevitable, that independence was a luxury we could no longer afford. Today, looking around this room, I think we can confidently say those predictions were wrong. Scattered applause rippled through the crowd. In the front row, David and Patricia exchanged pleased glances. In the 12 months since we'd formed our initial partnership between Aurelia and Patricia's imprint, Muse Literary, the alliance had grown to include 7 independent publishers of varying sizes and specialties. Together, we had created a framework that allowed each house to maintain its unique editorial identity while sharing distribution networks, technology platforms, and administrative resources. The Independent Publishers Alliance isn't just about survival, I continued. It's about creating a more vibrant, diverse literary ecosystem. It's about proving that editorial vision and authentic author relationships matter more than corporate backing. And the numbers speak for themselves. I gestured to the screen behind me, where a graph displayed our collective growth over the past year. Together, our member publishers have increased revenue by 34%, expanded our international rights sales by over 50%, and launched 28 debut authors, several of whom are now award nominees and bestsellers. The audience broke into enthusiastic applause. In publishing terms, these were extraordinary results, particularly given the challenging market conditions. But most importantly, I said as the applause died down, we've created a genuine alternative to corporate publishing, one where decisions are made by editors who care deeply about books, not by executives focused solely on quarterly earnings, reports. As I concluded my remarks and introduced the next panel, I caught sight of a familiar face slipping into the back of the ballroom. Robert Mercer, looking significantly more relaxed than when I'd last seen him, gave me a small nod of acknowledgement. Robert had surprised everyone by joining Muse Literary as a senior editor under Patricia's leadership. The man who had once been so fixated on power and status had found a new sense of purpose in a supporting role, focusing on what he genuinely loved, discovering and developing literary talent. His industry connections and expertise had proven valuable to our alliance, and he'd gradually earned back some measure of respect among his peers. The irony wasn't lost on me. Robert had spent years blocking my advancement because he felt threatened, only to end up working within the alliance I had helped create. Life had a way of coming full circle. After the panel concluded, I made my way through the crowd, stopping frequently to chat with colleagues and accept congratulations on the alliance's success. When I finally reached the reception area, I found Zoe waiting with 2 glasses of champagne. "Quite a turnout," she observed, handing me a glass. "The corporate publishers are definitely paying attention now." "Good," I replied. "Competition makes everyone better." Zoe clinked her glass against mine, showing them how it's done. As we sipped our champagne, David approached with a woman I recognized as the literary editor from The Atlantic. After quick introductions, she explained that she was working on a feature about the changing dynamics in publishing. "Your alliance model is fascinating," she said. "But I'm curious, have you faced any resistance or pushback from the larger houses?" I exchanged a glance with David. "Some," I acknowledged. "Nexus in particular hasn't been thrilled with our success. They've tried various tactics to disrupt our momentum, such as aggressive counteroffers to authors we're courting, exclusive distribution deals with certain retailers, some behind-the-scenes pressure on agents. I shrugged. Standard corporate tactics, really. Nothing we haven't been able to handle. And how do you respond to critics who say your alliance is just corporate consolidation by another name? She pressed. I'd invite them to look at how we operate, David replied. Each member publisher maintains complete editorial independence. We share resources and infrastructure, but not editorial control. Every house makes its own acquisition decisions based on its unique vision, not on centralized dictates about what will sell. The proof is in our catalogs, I added. Look at the diversity of voices, styles, and perspectives across our member publishers. That's something you don't typically see in corporate-owned imprints, where commercial considerations often override editorial judgment. The editor nodded, jotting notes. And what's next for the alliance? Further expansion? Thoughtful growth, I corrected. We're in discussions with several other independent publishers who share our values, but we're not looking to replicate the bigger is better mentality of corporate publishing. Our goal is to create a sustainable ecosystem where editorial excellence can thrive. After the editor moved on, I excused myself to get some fresh air. The hotel's rooftop garden offered a spectacular view of Chicago. At twilight, the city lights beginning to sparkle against the deepening blue sky. I was enjoying a moment of quiet reflection when Patricia joined me. Quite a day, she remarked, leaning against the railing beside me. Hard to believe how much has changed in a year. In many ways, I agreed, though some things remain constant. Such as the fundamental value of what we do, connecting worthy books with readers who will appreciate them. That hasn't changed, even if the business structures around us have evolved. Patricia smiled. Always the idealist. Though I must admit, your idealism has proven remarkably practical. She gestured back toward the ballroom. This alliance has exceeded even my optimistic projections. It's working because it addresses real needs, I said. Authors want publishers who genuinely care about their work. Readers want authentic, diverse voices. And independent editors want to make decisions based on literary merit, not just commercial calculations. While still making a profit, Patricia added pragmatically. Which we're doing, I confirmed. Quite respectably, in fact. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the city lights. I received an interesting call yesterday, Patricia said finally, from Meridian's former board chair, Thomas Harrington. I raised an eyebrow. And? He's not happy with how things have developed under Nexus ownership. The literary division has been gutted, just as we predicted. Quality authors are fleeing. The Meridian brand, which once stood for literary excellence, is being diluted with celebrity memoirs and ghost-written commercial fiction. Unfortunate but not surprising, I commented. Corporate acquisitions typically follow that pattern. Thomas wants to make amends, Patricia continued. He and several former board members are considering legal action to challenge some aspects of the Nexus acquisition. Apparently, there were procedural irregularities that might provide grounds for unwinding portions of the deal. I turned to face her fully. What are you suggesting? Nothing definitive yet, but if their legal challenge succeeds, there might be an opportunity to reclaim the Meridian name and some of its assets. She met my gaze directly. It would require financial backing, of course, and strong editorial leadership. The implication hung in the air between us. A chance to restore Meridian to its former status as a respected independent publisher, possibly under the umbrella of our alliance. That would be, I searched for the right word, poetic. Patricia smiled. Indeed, full circle in the most satisfying way. She touched my arm lightly. Just something to consider for the future. For now, we should get back to our guests. You're the star of this event, after all. As she turned to leave, I looked out over the city once more, thinking about how radically My professional life had transformed in 18 months. From undervalued editor at Meridian to architect of a new publishing model that was garnering national attention. From feeling powerless in the face of corporate machinations to helping create a viable alternative that was actually thriving. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of wondering whether I'd made the right decision, in walking away from the security of an established position. But looking back now, I couldn't imagine having taken any other path. When I returned to the ballroom, the reception was in full swing. Authors mingled with editors and agents, discussions animated by the shared sense that we were all part of something meaningful. Devin Saunders waved me over to where he was chatting with a promising debut novelist whose manuscript I'd discovered in a slush pile 6 months earlier. "There she is," Devin said warmly, "the woman who changed the game." The young author looked at me with undisguised admiration. "Your speech was inspiring. I've been telling Devin how grateful I am to be published by an Alliance member. My friends with corporate publishers are constantly fighting marketing departments over cover designs and title changes." I smiled. "We have the luxury of putting the work first. Though don't get me wrong, we still care very much about selling books. We just believe that quality and integrity lead to commercial success in the long run, not the other way around." As we continued chatting, I spotted Robert across the room, deep in conversation with a literary agent. Catching my eye, he raised his glass slightly in a gesture of respect. I returned the gesture, feeling not triumph or vindication, but a simple acknowledgement of how our parallel journeys had eventually converged on common ground. A love of good books and a commitment to getting them into readers' hands. Later that evening, as the event wound down, I found myself standing with David, Zoe, and Patricia, the core team that had launched our alliance a year earlier. "I think we can call this a success," David declared, surveying the room. "The industry is officially paying attention. And more importantly, so are readers," Patricia added. "Our sales numbers prove that there's a genuine appetite for the kinds of books we're publishing." Zoe grinned. "Not bad for a bunch of idealists who were told corporate consolidation was inevitable." "We've made a strong start," I agreed. "But this is just the beginning. The real test will be sustaining this momentum, continuing to innovate while staying true to our core values." David raised his glass. "To changing publishing for the better, and to Emma, whose LinkedIn update started it all." We clinked glasses, and I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. 18 months ago, I'd been passed over for a promotion. I'd earned, told to take notes from someone with a fraction of my experience. The humiliation of that moment had pushed me to make a radical change, walking away from a decade of work to start fresh somewhere that valued my contributions. At the time, it had felt like a leap into the unknown. Now, looking around at what we'd created together, it was clear that leaping had been the best decision of my career, and the beginning of something far more significant than mere personal success. My phone buzzed with a notification, a new LinkedIn message from a name I didn't immediately recognize. I opened it to find a note from Nexus's CEO. "Impressive gathering tonight. Your alliance model is gaining traction faster than we anticipated. Perhaps we should discuss potential collaboration rather than competition. I'd welcome a conversation at your convenience." I smiled, showing the message to my colleagues. "First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then they want to collaborate," David quipped. "What will you say?" Patricia asked. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. "I'll respond tomorrow, politely but firmly. Our independence isn't for sale, at any price." As we prepared to leave, I took one final look around the ballroom, now emptying but still buzzing with the energy of new connections made and possibilities explored. This was what success really looked like. Not revenge or validation or even personal achievement, but creating something valuable that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Something that mattered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.